The red-eye flight hummed through the night, a cocoon of dim lights and restless passengers. The flight attendant had just finished her safety briefing, her voice a practiced melody, when 6-year-old Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. Her wide, curious eyes scanned the cabin, catching the fleeting glances of strangers. "Daddy, why's everyone looking at us?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drone of the engines. Daniel Harper, seated in 12F, offered a gentle smile, his calloused hand adjusting the blanket draped over her small frame. "Because you're the brightest star in the sky, kiddo," he said, his tone warm but tinged with exhaustion. To the other passengers, Daniel was just another single dad, his graying hair and worn jacket blending into the sea of tired travelers. His eyes, etched with lines of a life hard lived, held no hint of anything extraordinary. He was just a guy trying to keep his daughter entertained on a long flight, maybe heading home after a weekend trip. But 30,000 feet above the earth, where the clouds parted like a secret waiting to spill, ordinary was about to unravel. A sharp crackle tore through the cabin's calm. The radio hissed with authority. "Delta 457, you've entered restricted airspace. Identify immediately." Gasps rippled through the rows. Hands gripped armrests, knuckles whitening. Whispers spread like wildfire, military jets, fighter planes, something about a no-fly zone. The captain's voice came over the intercom, unsteady, a crack in his usual polish. We're rerouting, sir. Stand by." Passengers exchanged nervous glances, some craning to peer out the windows into the inky night. A woman clutched her rosary beads. A businessman's phone glowed as he typed a frantic message. Emma, oblivious to the tension, doodled on her coloring book, humming a tune from a MidnightTales video she'd watched on her dad's phone before boarding. Daniel stood, his movement slow but deliberate, like a man who knew the weight of every step. The cabin seemed to hush around him, his quiet presence commanding attention without effort. He motioned to the flight attendant, a young woman whose badge read Sarah. "I need to speak to the cockpit," he said, his voice low but firm, the kind that didn't invite questions. Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking to the other passengers, then back to him. "Sir, I'm not sure," she began, but Daniel's gaze held steady, unyielding, a calm that felt like the eye of a storm. "Now," he said, not louder, but with a steel that made her nod. She led him forward, past rows of wide-eyed onlookers, their whispers trailing like smoke. In the cockpit, the pilots were tense, their hands dancing over controls as they tried to make sense of the situation. The radio crackled again, more insistent. "Delta 457, you have 10 seconds to comply." Sarah handed Daniel a headset, her hands trembling slightly. He slipped it on, his face unreadable, and leaned into the mic. Emma, back in 12F, peeked over the seat, clutching her stuffed bunny, her eyes fixed on her dad. "Raptor 1, this is Echo 7, Daniel said, his voice cutting through the static like a blade. "Stand down. I say again, stand down." The cabin fell silent. Even the pilots froze, exchanging a glance. The reply came swift, almost reverent. "Echo 7. Sir, is that really you?" Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he spoke again. "Affirmative. Clear the airspace." Through the windows, two sleek shadows emerged from the darkness, F-22 Raptors, their forms glinting under the moonlight, deadly and precise. The passengers gasped, some pressing their faces to the glass. But instead of circling like predators, the jets pulled back, their wings tipping in a sharp, unmistakable salute. A grandmother in 14C whispered, "Who is he?" A teenager filming on his phone muttered, "This is going viral on MidnightTales." Daniel removed the headset, handing it back to Sarah, who stared at him like she'd seen a ghost. He said nothing, just returned to his seat, where Emma curled against him, unfazed, as if her dad talking down fighter jets was just another Tuesday. Word spread faster than the plane's cruising speed. Daniel Harper wasn't just a single dad in coach, hauling a backpack stuffed with snacks and crayons. He was a decorated Air Force commander, once the leader of Echo Squadron, a call sign that still echoed in the halls of military bases. His missions, classified, whispered about in hushed tones, had saved countless lives in skies most people would never know. He'd flown through storms of fire, outmaneuvered enemies, and walked away from it all when his wife died, vowing to put Emma first. Now, here he was, in a worn-out jacket, flying commercial, because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they sit in 12F, helping their kid color a unicorn. The plane landed to a chorus of applause, the kind that erupts when fear gives way to war. On the tarmac, the F-22 pilots waited, standing at attention as Daniel and Emma stepped off the plane. They weren't saluting a uniform or a medal, they were saluting the man who'd given up glory for a little girl who called him Daddy. One pilot, a young woman with a buzz cut, knelt beside Emma, her voice soft. "Your dad's a hero, you know." Emma tilted her head, puzzled. "I already knew that," she said, clutching her bunny tighter. The pilot laughed, glancing at Daniel, who just shrugged, his eyes softening as he ruffled Emma's hair. As they walked through the terminal, passengers stole glances, some snapping photos, others whispering about posting it to MidnightTales. Daniel didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't care. His focus was on Emma, who skipped beside him, chattering about her favorite MidnightTales episode, the one about a dragon who saved a village. To her, this was just another adventure with her dad, the man who could do anything, whether it was fixing her bike, making pancakes, or telling fighter jets to back off. The truth was, Daniel Harper had spent years keeping his past buried. He'd traded cockpits for carpools, medals for bedtime stories. After losing his wife, he'd made a promise to Emma, no matter what the world demanded, she'd always come first. He didn't talk about the missions, the lives he'd saved, or the call sign that still made pilots snap to attention. He didn't need to. The world could keep its legends, he had a daughter who needed him more. But that night, as the plane cut through the clouds and the jets saluted, the world caught a glimpse of who he really was. Not just a dad, but a man who carried the weight of the sky on his shoulders and the love of a child in his arms. The story didn't end on the tarmac. By morning, clips of the incident were trending, shared across platforms, including a viral post on MidnightTales titled "The Hero in 12F." Commenters speculated wildly, ex-CIA, secret agent, retired general. But those who knew Daniel, the ones who had flown with him, just smiled and shook their heads. He wasn't a myth or a mystery. He was a father who'd chosen a different kind of mission, one that didn't come with medals but was harder than any dogfight. Back home, Daniel tucked Emma into bed, her bunny tucked under her arm. She yawned, her voice sleepy. "Daddy, are you famous now?" He chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Nah, kiddo. Just your dad." She nodded, already drifting off, her dreams filled with dragons and jets and the man who made her feel like the brightest star in any sky. Sometimes, heroes don't wear capes or uniforms. Sometimes, they sit quietly in coach, a coloring book in one hand and a legacy in the other. They don't seek the spotlight, but when it finds them, it's because the world can't help but notice. Daniel Harper didn't need a call sign to define him. The only one that mattered was the one whispered in the dark, when a little girl's voice said, "Daddy." And for him, that was enough. The next day, as Emma watched her favorite MidnightTales video, Daniel sipped his coffee, glancing at the notifications lighting up his phone. Messages from old squadron mates, a few from the airline, even a producer from MidnightTales asking for an interview. He ignored them all, his eyes on Emma as she laughed at the screen. The world could wait. He'd already answered the only call that mattered.